Okay, I think most of people are here, so we're going to begin. So welcome again, I'm Vi, I'll be your host today. Today we're going to talk about how to win and retain clients, and we're going to give you the agency drill book for 2025, brought to you by Omnisend. So today we're going to cover four main things that you might need to know as an agency. We're going to talk about the anatomy of an ideal agency team. We're going to talk about how to be the strategist your clients dream of. We're also going to cover the auditing messy email accounts, because someone's got to do it. So we'll tell you how to do it, how to make it work. And we're also going to wrap this up by talking about how to expand your services without losing your sanity, because I'm sure we have lots of agency owners that like always balancing between the sanity and the burnout. So to help me with that, I have an amazing group of people. I feel very honored to be here with you today, guys. So first we have Nick from Structured. Sorry. Nick, would you like to say hello?
What's up, everybody? I just wanted to make sure I got the cue to jump on stage. Good to see everybody here. And I was actually reading all the chat. This is probably one of the most diverse time zones that we've ever been a part of. Like, it's in the morning over here on the West Coast in California, and then we have everywhere from Dubai to Nigeria to the Philippines. It is absolutely crazy. Netherlands, people coming in. So it's gonna be a fun one. It's gonna be a short, very impactful, straight to the point with some good speakers that kind of know everything that you guys are here to listen to.
Amazing. Thank you. Then we have Sydney from Omnisend. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here, and ditto to what Nick said. So excited to jump right in.
Awesome. Then we have Jimmy and Chase from the Ecom Email Marketer.
Hey, everyone. Chase isn't here, but he'll be here in a second. So he's running a few minutes late, dropping off the kids, but excited to be here. Got a great presentation. Looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's just like balancing your business and life and everything. Real example. Awesome. And then we have Jesse from Viber Media.
Hey, everyone. Super excited for this. Like, going off of Nick, Jimmy, and Sydney, I'm excited for this. I looked at the chat, and similar to Nick, I'm blown away by the amount of places people are from. I think I'm so used to a New York City or a Europe chat. So seeing places from Africa to Asia to everywhere else is awesome. And I think we have a killer team here to give punchy and actual tactical takeaways that you can use in your business. So I'm very excited, and thanks for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, I think like everything we're going to talk about is super applicable throughout the world. So, this is going to be great. And also, we have a little treat from Team Omnisend. We're going to do a giveaway of 3 Amazon vouchers worth of $100. So pay attention, not just to learn good stuff, but also I'll be asking you questions and see if you caught the information that was shared. So one last thing, we have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, drop it there so we can see it and we'll try to answer those. We also have a team on today, so they're going to be answering the questions in the chat box in case they're very general. And also, this is being recorded, so you will get an email with the recording. So if you miss something, don't worry, you'll get all the info delivered to your inbox in a few days. Great. So we're ready to begin. Nick, you're up.
Cool. We covered, yeah? All good, Vi?
Yeah, all good.
Beautiful. All right, so we have a quick little run through. It should take me about, let me make sure I get my timer set up, about 23 plus minutes. If I go a little bit long, please knock me, and if anything, I'll re-record it and send everybody kind of like the long form version of everybody. But it's early in the morning, and sometimes I like to get a little bit longer than normally. This talk has been something that I've kind of been thinking through for ongoing for the last 5.5 years, because ultimately we get in the agency space. We really care about servicing our clients, but also there's a progression from you might be really good at one core skill, email marketing, design, media buying, communication, creative strategy. There's been this really big build of freelancer to agency to what hopes to be my dream and a couple of yours, which is acquisition. And I'll share a brief story of like where we get to this and why I feel uniquely confident to speak about these things. I'm pushing my 12th year in the agency specific space. And we have 4 core agencies and communities that we've been able to build. First is structured. That is the day-to-day. That is what we call our mothership. It is the largest agency that we have. Constant Creative, which is an on-demand as well as an agency. Geekx, which is more of like an internet community. And then lastly, we are Lucid as a more niche specific agency that services the THC and or healthy beverage space. This kind of started with an idea of Jake, which is our current partner, our CEO of Structure, which is like, we want to be the ultimate growth solution. And I was like, well, there's really only one way to kind of figure this out is if we dig in and actually do it and build it ourselves. In 2019, when we initially started, this was the very first year that we're like, we're not just media buyers, we know how to run growth and build. This was our first close $1 million year. And we ran right into 2022, and this is when things really went correctly. Now, you probably can't get away from Chase Dimond or myself or even Jimmy on Twitter or LinkedIn. All we do is continue to pump and continue to be as big and as organic as possible. This is the beginning of seeing what this is coming through. So you might just start hearing about us or see us come through, but we've been active in various communities, and now we just choose to do it much more public on these major channels. That's where a lot of the deal flow comes in. 2021, everybody probably experienced this similarly if you were back in online or in that space at that current time. So the COVID boom, everybody needed us, and we were the hot chicks at the bar for sure. 2021 into 2022 was a very core year. This is when we actually learned how to build, how to have the right process, how to hire and have the right teammates. And this was kind of like the globalization of the workforce. So we are primarily US based. We then went to primarily North America based, so Canada as well as Latin America. And I think this group and this structure was so perfectly done because it allowed me to get into what we did in 2023. I won't get into 2024 because 2024 we had a step back year specifically. But 2023 we hit the record that we wanted, which was surpass that 8-figure mark, and then we've been able to sustain and slightly dip over the last year and a half for two strategic reasons that I'll get to at the back half of this preso. Each year we kind of had a core learning of what we needed to do to continue to evolve and level up. So I'll go briefly through these other sections as we go year over year and kind of the core takeaways and learnings. At the beginning, this is probably where you're at if you're at the, maybe not the revenue side, but it's maybe specifically the skill or the core delivery that you guys are selling or what you're offering as your initial service. And really what comes down to is a two core area balance. You have the fulfillment and the establishment of what your skill is and how good you are. And then on the team, this is when you start figuring out like how much compensation or what is the commitment that they're going to give you. Overly, you have two different ways of structuring this. You have the systematic way of how do we find new partners? What is your lead gen? Are people coming to you consistently? Are you running paid ads? Are you doing organic content? What is that system of new leads or new partners finding you? And then do you have a way that you can clearly articulate, this is how we do our media buying. This is how we do our specific email campaigns, our flow work. Those are the two core anchors. And lastly is there a really clear way that you're able to retain these partners? This is the three buckets. This is agency life in a nutshell. How are we finding them? How are we communicating our ideology of how we execute? And how are we making sure that we're retaining our overall partners? Doesn't get any different. So for us specifically, this is where we really focus on our content creation, the event creation, as well as how many referrals we can grab, and at what time do we request these. When we're trying to execute the way that we media buy, at the time media buy, we're very clear in our media planning and our communication of why we're doing what we're doing. Our account structure could be unique at the time to what we're doing, and everybody has their way of like wanting to run media depending on the brand that comes through. For email, it might be the way that you address flows. It might be the way that you do your creative strategy or your briefing to your creators or the other officers and services that you have. Or in our last cases, our creative testing. And lastly, you're retaining your partners. So for us, there's really three core areas in this. Your Slack etiquette or your ability to communicate. Some people are still in email. No problem there. I think brands and partners are wanting to demand a lot more from us. So giving them the appropriate access and setting it very clear. There is an etiquette to slacking. I think we'll talk briefly about that. I think I have a screenshot of how we're doing it. The reporting and ongoing development of the overall teammates. This in a nutshell, if I were to just like pause and just stick and have conversations here, this is more than 40 minutes of combo, but we'll keep it going. This is where I want us to stay focused on. So what we're thinking about when we're building our systems of pods or team that are trying to manage paid media, it looks at how much are they getting? What's the compensation potentially for the teammates that we want overseeing this pod or managing this spend? We take a percentage of the total ad spend that they're going to be managed, the total amount of teammates that are going to manage, and these both can change. We might have an incredible media buyer that he or she might not be great at managing people, but they're really good at scaling themselves. So they might be a little bit more on the lone wolf side, but they still need a junior, they still need uploaders, they still need designers, they still need people that they need to lead. They might get a lower percentage of what's happening here versus if they maybe manage less ad spend overall, but they have a lot of good teammates that are a great teacher, you can apply different sets of multiples of how this goes. And then lastly, what this is built upon is like there's going to be an agreed upon base compensation. I felt it was important to talk about this specifically now is because as we come into a weird, how do you say this? If we come into a weird scenario where there could be a lot of people looking for work or whatever we're about to go through on a world scale, thinking through the unique way of incentivizing them or repositioning their comp could allow them to want to stay with you longer, especially if you have strong deal flow or people coming through. As we come into our last year or in 2020, this was something that was big for us. So this was a little bit of our step into the acquisition or an integration phase. So we knew we needed to expand, but when you go into team expansion, if you don't have clear processes for new hires coming into the core service, you can look outside of your core service and then look to try and offer another acquisition. So this is kind of what we did. When you're thinking about wanting to buy or wanting to build it, I think you have to think about this specific framework. Is this a strategic decision that we need to go into that can offer another service for one of our off of our initial core service? Or should we just expand the service that we're already good at and then just go deeper into that area? Should we build it? Is it best for us to build it? Are we the best people to build it? In our case, we were not. We didn't know email. We didn't know SMS. We didn't know design for retention. Is there other people out there that are doing way better than us? Absolutely. At the time, we were not the ones that we needed to call it. Can we make money with it immediately? So if we were able to acquire them, could we start paying back ourselves for this initial acquisition, and how fast could we do that? And lastly, can we build this cost effectively while maintaining the overall quality? If we could have acquired and then built it as much as we wanted to, or if we could have built it fast enough, this would have been the right path to go. And we actually did that with Chase's initial agency, Balance Labs, and Chase has been a best friend of mine for quite a while. We live literally walking distance from each other, and he's just been very, very good at teaching me and the growth. So he's a good man, and I appreciate him tremendously. When we look at the overall growth, so the team that we're trying to, as we look to acquire another team, this is the kind of core quadrants that we needed to really be able to provide for us. So overall, this company structure looks like, can they provide more revenue growth or make it more sticky? Can they be stickier for my clients to stay with us? So if we offered paid media, and then now all of a sudden now we offer, so we were offering acquisition, now we're all of a sudden offering retention. This is the perfect place for them to extend contract length and extend the ability for them to kind of be retained from us overall. Do we get access to talent and expertise? This alone is usually what we are acquiring on the agency front. Really high quality people. This is people are our capital, of course. And so this is the area that usually is where I'm okay overpaying or understanding the value when you know you have really core people coming in, because they're going to solve a lot of other problems that might potentially be in your existing agency. And then lastly, how much business development can they produce? We really don't want to be we really don't want to have another team be a part of us if they can't drive their own deal flow. We have our own, we know how to get it, but it's also a huge benefit when the person that we're acquiring is able to generate themselves, whether it's through a funnel, whether it's through a personal brand, what have you, but it is extremely important that we do it in that manner. 2020 was the big year. This is where we actually started to rebuild the overall org structure. Not that we've been integrating and acquiring, the revenue jump was specifically there for us. We changed our structure to the pod structure back in 2021, and we've been evolving and changing and playing with it ever since. But this was like probably the biggest gateway for me to kind of grow and expand initially, which is fun. And lastly, this is a lot of the globalization that we really, really focused on or went through. And we have a couple of good ways of doing this, but ultimately we needed to make sure that they understood American colloquialisms. They're able to communicate on specific time zones for the core team that was based in the States. And generally speaking, they were complementary or able to get the work done outside of core office hours, which was again something that was important to me and my initial team. We believe that we were able to save like anywhere between $2,000 to $8,000 if or 2 to 8x of what the current onshore salary would have been. This has changed now that more people there's more access to it. There's more recruiting firms to it. There's a lot of different platforms that you can kind of go and do this on. I would have done this so much sooner because this to me was what we needed to do to stay competitive. And I think if you are probably more there now, most people are there now than beforehand. This is a screenshot of all the job boards that we use across the world technically. And I would even say like this is a good market specifically in the Latin American community. So if you are looking for more, this has been a godsend for us. And if it doesn't open, please tell me because I might have moved around some of the Google Drives. Some of you might be structured this way. This is kind of the initial evolution of where we were. So we had all of account management, all of design, all of media buying. So we had heads of these core areas and departments, and they were assigned to the specific clients, but they never worked together in their own team. They were just like, I'm a designer. I am assigned these. I have my senior person above me that I can go to if I need help, my media buyer, etc. I didn't like it, but I liked it for these core reasons until they actually started to be detrimental to us because we needed to be very much async. They stayed pretty siloed, so they kind of like only interacted with their people. They didn't really fully understand what the core service was or the timelines it took for a media buyer to do something or a designer or a template builder to do their thing. The accountability was nice, but then they also didn't understand, again, like the rest of the group, how long it took for them, which caused tension because they couldn't communicate clearly to the partners how long it should take or how long it shouldn't take. And then lastly, the incentivization was where do they grow? Like, how could I assign account managers that may or may not be responsible for revenue generation, yet media buyers might be more responsible for more revenue generation? So it was really difficult to build cohesive incentivization programs. So we had to go to the overall pod structure, which as you have a senior person that's more communicative to the client as well as setting strategy and direction, they're de facto the point person. And then that the money that's generated from within that pod, they have minimum revenue targets and they're able to all share in the upside because they're all working and communicating together. Like honestly, a true marketing team, right? I think a lot of agencies forget that we are just massive glorified marketing departments that work on behalf of many people. It's the same structure, it's the same system, it's the same way of communicating. The output is the same depending on the service from the acquisition side or the retention side of you, but we are a team that does marketing, hard stop. And so what I didn't like about this was sometimes the lead strategist might not be the most senior person. You might have a senior person in different roles. So the leadership of who is who to where to go to when problems hit the fan didn't really necessarily work. So we kind of did a unique structure overall. The teams still were disservice in each pod structure similar to before. But now what they ended up having was they had heads of or leads of their area and their core departments that we were offering. Yet these people, usually this would be tiered. So you have the juniors that we're managing, you have the seniors right above it, and then you have leadership above that. These leaders, seniors, still needed to fulfill. They still needed to be on their own pod team, but they were the go-to person that was in charge of setting direction, making sure we're changing processes, making sure that we're progressing juniors into seniors and seniors above this and growing the book of business. This was their core competency and their role, but then they had less brands. More important, other brands are tier one or A+ brands. And then they were also responsible for the development of the rest of the team. This is what really was a game changer for us that allowed us to kind of move into different sets and stages. We have two templates. One is pricing out salaries as well as desired margin. So this would help you kind of like pod build, if you will. And then you can kind of fluctuate, play with how many clients, what is the service that I need to potentially provide, and where's my next hire coming from. So I would say this is a nice place to little play around. So feel free to screenshot and grab it. Of another one where it's like, this is more on an individual pod basis. This is more around a team of pods that are working within themselves. I would play with these and then start understanding like, where does my offer need to be? What does my price per employee need to be? You can go from an hourly state or you can just go to general salary. But these two documents are something that I still personally play with when I'm trying to think about hiring or even justifying going onshore versus offshore. You can kind of keep the recruiters and everybody in line when you need to know and manage your overall margin. So I hope you have something like this already. If you don't, this will probably get you 60, 70% of the way there. Two caveats I'll add in there is where we like to be now is we do like to put people on part-time or a contract-based work first. unless it's an extremely senior position. And at this point, I would need them to come in and work through scenarios. I'm committed to them full time, but they're definitely on a strict probation period. But usually the more senior they are, the less they're likely to do like project-based work specifically. Some of them will. I won't push this. I'll start there, but I won't necessarily push this. And then everything that they're coming into to manage, especially if it's an overall team or pod, we communicate the margin maintenance at all times. And this is something that pods report to leadership, and the leadership optimizes there for deal flow. 2022, this is pretty similar to what we wanted to do on when we first acquired Chase's team. We then went on a little bit of an acquiring spree, and 2 more people come through just to expand the initial offering. And as a friend McGregor explained, is the only way that I think the development of a team continues to evolve is if you continue to offer and present new blood and fresh people into the space. Because if you aren't able to understand at the end, like there is 2 core things after you start adding other services, is now initial core service revenue growth, as well as talent and team expansion and training. So this is where 2022, 2023 even started to continue to grow, because this initial progression looked like this. I was really good at media buying. Jake was really good at media buying. We made a good amount of money. That allowed me to build 1 or 2 people from the team. We made more profit. As straightforward as possible. This is the safest way and easiest way to go, and find a couple of juniors once you're able to close a couple business. Your business, the revenue that you want to make is up to how hard you want to work or how much deal flow you can find. Pretty straightforward. We did a different path, and I think this is the one that we're in it longer than I thought. And now I'm hoping that maybe 2025, 2026 is a really cool year for us. So instead of doing what we just talked about, we then built it even larger. Thought we could make even more money. We started adding email, UGC, more web dev CRO. And I think at this point, we'll be able to kind of turn into like the acquisition that I'm hoping to potentially have, or we could be a platform and continue to buy other agencies on the structure platform itself. I think this is a lot longer than I wanted it to be, but because of what we've had to all go through, we've never gone through a pandemic before. We don't know what we're going through currently. I'm happy to at least have a profitable business that continues to print and meet incredible founders like Fiona and Jake, and I continue to be in it on a day-to-day basis. 2023, 2024, and then now what's going to happen in 2025. I'll wrap up 2024 since I don't have it fully here, because it was the first time in our company history we went backwards. We lost revenue because of decisions that we made. I won't talk about it yet, but I'll briefly go into it towards the back half of this. In 2023, we went into contract expansion and then non-founder sales led. We were able to get by from myself, Chase, and Jake on doing 90% of the deal flow or 90% of the deal generation, as well as deal closing from the founder side. In 2023, it was the first time we started to trust the sales team, as well as build enough decks, processes, and downsells that allowed us to start to believe that we are able to find growth or have other people interested in potentially acquiring us. And so when we're going to acquirers, these are the core areas that they really actually care about. And we made that decision consciously in 2023, then had to rebuild in 2024. And now what we look at 2025 as a launch year, or almost like a rebirth, rebuild year. And I think it's the right time to do it, especially if you're really good at what you're doing now. There's going to be a lot of demand for high quality work. What looks like this is they care about revenue growth, of course, but it's actually a little bit more nuanced. They want to see like your month over month growth year to year. January 2023 to January 2024, January 2024 to January 2025. They want to continue to see linear growth, because this will count for 1 or 2 or even a quarter of poor growth or stagnation, because they need to see the story. Like if you're a slow close January to March, understood, but it can't be another Q2 that's slow and a Q3 that's slow unless there's a real story as to why that's happening. Our LTV expansion, how many different services, and this is usually the discussion you have, like, well, Nick, I'm really good at running paid media, but I'm not necessarily incredible at doing email. This might be the perfect opportunity to develop somebody internally, find a small freelancer that you can give deal flow to and take a kickback so that you're able to generate revenue off of these leads, stay close to them, or you can continue to look for small acquisitions, which is definitely available. I think there's a lot more people willing to do this now into whatever hardship that they're going to go through. And lastly, we have revenue LTV retention. It's pretty straightforward to speak for itself. and this is the management of revenue per employee. I used to have a metric I tied to this, and then I've actually been debunked many times. So I'm not going to throw a number out of like what the target revenue per employee is going to be, especially when you have offshore employees. This number is going to skew. So I think there's an onshore and offshore revenue per employee that's important to reach. I don't have a number for you to shoot for, unfortunately, because my numbers are all over the place and functionally. And they really don't want the founder to be heavily involved in sales. They can be involved, obviously, because you are going to be the face, but you can't be heavily involved there. Lastly, what we needed to understand is the team growth. So anybody that wanted to stay with us, we had 3 areas that we needed to service, which was overall compensation, the opportunity to continue to grow or move into different areas, and if or when they wanted to be into management, because not everybody wants to manage. But this is the overall positioning. What we found out for service expansion was that if we can keep people on paid media, generally speaking, we'd be able to get them onto retention. If they were just on paid media, they were likely to stay with us for about 4 months initial contract period. Maybe we can stretch them to 6. We added an email. Now they're sticking with this 8 to 9. Some of them are past 12, which is incredible because of the service. If we were able to add them into CRO, then they were seeing just a small, maybe a month or 2 months longer than them. And if I was able to do retention or just CRO, we had a growth. What this map shows us is like, you need to know, like, what's the initial touch points? Kind of like if you're running an e-commerce store, what's my hero product? And then what am I going to use to keep them stickier, coming back and buying with us? We knew that if we could find their way into multiple services, the longer they stay with us, the more they'd be with us. So that's LTV expansion and LTV retention. Both of those metrics extremely important as you continue to grow or looking to hire or look to overall partner. And we found our path. I think the last thing I'll talk about when we're going through right now is we believe that there's going to be a lot of hard conversations with our senior leadership that are wanting to make sure that we are established as a good enough company to get through whatever we're going through. It's all in the news in America. It's all in the news across the world. And I think this is a great place to double down on those that are really nationalists, the ones that really wave the flag of your company, or ones that are necessarily just like more opportunistic, or they might be interested in being half-time with you or half-time on their own, that they can get paid elsewhere. I think these are very real conversations that can happen, and they should happen, especially now. It was a lot, but I told you that I'd be able to finish in 24 minutes. I got 16 seconds left. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity to speak with you. And I will say it might be hard now, but it's not going to be this hard forever. And I do still think after 11 to 12 years in this space, being in the agency world is so worth it. You learn so many skills, and it can translate to something else right on time.
As I was listening to you, I kind of was thinking about our audience, because we have such a range of people who are just starting off, people who are just growing their agencies really fast. So I think for those who might be a little bit small, I think this kind of gave the opportunity to dream bigger, see what's available and kind of get the structure in their mind.
Look, I think I really do miss, and my CEO would kill me I hope, Jake, if you're on this, I apologize. I miss being small and lean. I miss having like 5 to 10 people on the team, and not even from like a money standpoint, but you knew everything that was going on within the company, and it felt good, right? And I think when I stepped out and let Jake be like our CEO and our lead in, I think it was like 2022, 2023, I really had a refined purpose. And I think some of us that are so used to doing and find value in the execution, take a look at leadership, take a look at mentorship, take a look at like what else you can provide other than just like your core output of skill. And I think a lot of the smaller or just starting out execution people, they're like, I'm really good at this core skill. Yeah, you probably are, but maybe get 1 or 2 people you can lead, and you might be surprised.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Like, you might be surprised. You just need to try it. I really like the example of the freelancers, get one and then focus on, acquisition and other points. Just try it. Yeah.
It's true. And what's interesting to us, like we'll find some employees that come to us and like, hey, by the way, I have like 2 or 3 clients on the side. We're like, cool, good. That means that you were able to convince them to work for you, sales. You were able to fulfill and deliver on the things that you're responsible for. 2, you maybe have 1 or 2 people supporting you. 3, and it's actually an attractive draw. And obviously we got to make sure incentives are aligned and you're not overspending time there versus here. But it actually is more appealing than someone going like, I'm just hoping to get started in this space. You're already working, you're already active, and you're continuing to grow. And sometimes you need to kind of like want to plug into a larger I call it like an agency is a Wi-Fi network that you provide signal and information to everybody. And I think if you plug into the right one, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just a note for everyone, we will be sharing the slides in the recording as well. So if you didn't get a chance to snap the QR codes or access the docs, you will get it in the email. And I really love the cheat sheet with the Excel, where you can put in all the numbers and see what's happening with that. Everyone loves a sheet.
Yeah, everyone loves a good sheet. I'm going to jump into the chat. I'll start answering any questions, and I'll just stay on a little bit longer just to keep you on track.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Great. And I could see in the chat that people are loving you, Nick. So I will try to get you on in the coming months as well. I think you still have a lot to say.
Thanks, guys, for the time.
Awesome. Fantastic.
All right. Awesome. So, hi, everyone. First off, I just want to say I'm super excited to be here with you today. Just talking with all of you because you are also at the heart of your customer success. So I lead our customer success team here at Omnisend, but you guys are also the ones building the strategies, launching the campaigns, solving the problems, and sometimes convincing clients to listen when it really matters the most. So that's not always easy, especially when you're trying to prove your value, show ROI, and then also keep clients engaged long term. So today I'll just walk through exactly how to make yourself as indispensable as possible. We'll cover ways to prove your value in ways that your clients actually do care about and build relationships that turn into long-term partnerships. Plus, I'll just share a few real examples, everyday tactics, things that you can start using right away to keep your clients not just happy, but loyal, and then also growing with you. Okay, so we'll just dive right in. So to kick things off, I want to show you exactly what this looks like in practice. So let's take a quick look at a real client scenario. When we saw this in one of our clients' accounts, let's just say they were not where they needed to be. We needed to definitely take some action. Open rates were extremely low, click rates were low, conversions were even lower. But let's fast forward to 2 to 3 weeks, and their transformation was huge. Higher engagement, stronger revenue, a better customer journey. And most importantly, a client that trusted the process and was really excited about the results. So what changed? How did they go from a 5% to a 70% open rate in just a few weeks? What helped take this account from struggling to scaling? Let's unpack that because exactly where you as the strategic partner is going to come in and help this client get there. So why did the client not just turn when he saw those poor results? How do you go from struggling to prove your impact to becoming that indispensable part of your client's success? The answer isn't going to be just running those campaigns. It's going to be about delivering measurable value, tracking the right KPIs, and then building those relationships that keep the clients coming back. So that's exactly where the customer success mindset is going to come in. Just like we at Omnisend act as those strategic partners for our customers, you're going to have the same opportunity to do for your clients. By proactively guiding them, optimizing their strategies, and proving real results, you become more than that just service provider. You're going to become a trusted go-to expert that they just can't afford to lose. So let's break it down. What is that role of a CSM at Omnisend? We're going to be that strategic partner who supports growth by providing personalized, actionable recommendations based on data. We're going to do this by aligning with brands' goals, KPIs to drive strategy and results. But maybe most importantly, we're also super passionate about e-commerce, marketing, and then helping our clients succeed. So how is this going to be similar to you? Basically, we both need to retain clients through that strategy. Agencies that position themselves as strategic partners increase retention and revenue. And then lastly, agencies like CSM should act as those consultants and not just service providers. Overall, we just really want our clients to see success and a high ROI. So we can go ahead and dive into those non-negotiables, tactics, and things that will actually help you not just keep those clients, but keep them engaged, loyal, and actually listening. So it all starts with value, right? How do we prove our value? It starts with these 4 essential principles. So we want to be as proactive as possible and not reactive. We don't want to wait for our clients to ask for help. We're going to show up with strategic, proactive recommendations that actually make sense for where they are in their journey and then where they want to go. We need to tailor our suggestions to their goals and bring them new ideas before they even know that they need them, right? So tell a story with performance, right? So data is powerful, but only if it's presented in a way that's easy to understand and meaningful. Use the performance metrics you have to tell a story. What's working? What's not? What should they do next? Position yourself as a guide and not just showing them that data. Next, we have to explain why. If your clients don't understand the reasoning behind your recommendations, they're not going to take actions. Would you, right? Like if someone's just telling you to do something and you don't understand why would you do that? So they won't see your value as well on top of that. So whether you're suggesting an A/B test, maybe a new automation or a segmentation strategy, we need to always tie it back to their goals and clearly explain how it's going to move that needle. How is it going to help them reach that goal, whether it's retention, revenue, engagement, and so forth. We also want to consistently connect your work to revenue. So at the end of the day, those results do matter. You need to clearly and consistently show how your efforts are driving business outcomes, especially that revenue. Whether it's from improved engagement, higher conversion rates, or smarter automations, make your impact very, very obvious. We all know proving value is critical, but the most impactful ways to do this is by proactively identifying gaps and opportunities in your client's email strategy before they're even asking for that help. That's when you move from becoming sort of a vendor to a true strategic partner. And then to truly become indispensable, it's not enough to just surface insights. You need to turn those insights into clear, actionable recommendations. And more importantly, you have to build that trust that makes the clients want to follow your lead. At the end of the day, great results aren't just going to come from, that that value, those recommendations. It's going to come from great relationships. Clients don't stick around just for the reports and the numbers, things that we're going to show them. They're staying with agencies that they trust. The ones who are listening, they're adapting, they're challenging them when needed, and then they're also guiding them towards growth consistently. So how are you going to build those kinds of relationships? For us, it starts with a few key habits. Personalizing your approach. And some of these, kind of play back into email marketing too, and how you're retaining, those subscribers. So it's super fun there, but you're going to personalize your approach. Every client is going to be different. We need to truly understand their business needs, speak their language, and make them heard, and valued. Next, we also need to make sure that we're being transparent and inviting that feedback. Honest, constructive communication builds credibility. We're not going to just give feedback. We're going to ask for it. We're going to create an open, ongoing dialogue, and then showing that we're acting on that feedback as well. Then, super important, we need to set clear expectations and then exceed them. When you underpromise and overdeliver, trust compounds, and so forth. And then most importantly, show up as their strategic partner. Be the person they rely on, not just for support, but for direction, insight, and growth. In short, we need to be their trusted advisor. That's what's going to create those long-term relationships, long-term loyalty, and it's what's going to keep the clients coming back year after year. So once you've established that trust, the next step is going to ensure your clients see continuous, tangible value day in and day out. The three main tactics that have really worked for our team here at Omnisend in the sense of retention is going to be successful onboarding that sets clear expectations and a true understanding of those clients' goals, business reviews, and then day-to-day engagement, just focusing on that proactiveness. So as you know, how you're onboarding a client sets the tone for everything that's following. It's your first opportunity to build trust, establish expectations, and show them that they've made the right decision by choosing you. So our onboarding experience here at Omnisend is designed to create a seamless strategic start to the partnership, one that builds momentum from day one. So it really all begins with a migration assistance, where we handle everything from template transfers, contact imports, to recreating forms and workflows in their account from their previous ESP into Omnisend. This not only removes friction, but sets the foundation for long-term success. Typically, our onboarding structure is over about 30 days, guided by a custom roadmap tailored to the client's goals and use case. So it's different for every single client that we're onboarding. From the very beginning, we're focusing on setting clear expectations on both sides of what we expect. So, and getting aligned on what success looks like for them and what we know success looks like for us. A key part of that success is ensuring clients start off with strong deliverability. We all know how complicated deliverability can be. So if that's not strong from the beginning, it's going to be a mess moving forward. So we create a custom domain warm-up plan for each account based on their sending practices, past performance, engagement, all of those questions that are super important to ask. It's not just a technical step, but it's also a real chance for each CSM to build early trust with their new client, showing that we're proactively protecting and investing in their performance from the get-go. So throughout onboarding, we are walking clients through Omnisend's tools, strategies, and best practices, making sure that they feel confident as well. But we're also making sure that they see value immediately, right? If their main goal is revenue, we're not waiting to enable, anything in their account. We're going to act. We're enabling high impact automations, think perhaps in abandoned cart flows right away, just so they can see tangible results early in the process and then continue to build off of that. This approach is ensuring that both structure and flexibility is included in onboarding. So the roadmap is providing clarity and accountability, while the strategy remains client-centric and we can move around that. At the end of the 30 days, we conduct a formal onboarding review, highlighting, ROI, and then sharing any key results that we've had as well. A great onboarding experience is going to build that momentum, but sustaining that momentum is what turns a good partnership into a great one. So that's where these business reviews are really going to come into play here. They'll be your chance to realign on goals, celebrate wins, and show ongoing value in a way that keeps clients engaged and growing with you. So these business reviews that focus on insights and not just reports are the most powerful driver of retention and growth for us here. So at Omnisend, our CSMs offer reviews at 30-day, monthly, or quarterly cadences, really just based on the client's needs. So super flexible there. We're meeting them where they need us. And they aren't just data dumps. They're going to be structured conversations designed to showcase ROI, highlight areas for improvement, and keep us closely aligned with our customers' evolving goals, expectations, and KPIs. So we really structure this to be more of a conversation-based check-in review with our clients to make sure that everyone feels included and we can really provide value in each step moving forward. Each review is tailored and thoughtful. We take the time to understand what's changed in the customer's business, what's remained consistent, and how that's going to impact their overall strategy. The context allows us to deliver truly impactful, relevant recommendations that meet them where they are and guide them towards where they want to go. As goals shift, we're going to shift with them, offering next steps that are directly tied to what matters the most for their business. So continuing with that proactive recommendations there. These reviews also are going to give us a chance to reinforce that value that I mentioned by recapping recent feature releases. Perhaps it's from Omnisend, perhaps it's from other vendors that you're discussing, introducing new services. So for us on the CSM side, stuff such as like a deliverability audit, providing more migration, and the list goes on. And then also surfacing strategic insights backed by their own performance data. So really using what we've discussed to provide them some insights there. And just as importantly, we're going to listen. We use this time to capture customer sentiment, what features they want to see next, maybe what ROI they're aiming for, and also how we can better support their success moving forward. So while business reviews are those key milestones in the client relationship, that real magic definitely happens day to day. So it's in those regular touch points, whether it's a quick check-in, jumping into perhaps solve a problem, or just sharing a timely tip, that you're going to build trust and show that you're consistently thinking ahead on your client's behalf. Every call, every email, every time you're talking to your client is an opportunity to add that value and not just check in. So rather than simply asking, how are things going, your touch points should always be intentional and insight driven. These moments are your chance to position yourself as a strategic partner who's thinking ahead and helping your clients grow. So how are we going to make every interaction count? We need to come prepared every single time with optimizations. So reviewing recent performance, recommending specific tweaks to improve results, whether it's segmentation, automations, or perhaps even timing strategies. But we also want to be aware of what's going on in the world, right? Share industry trends, bring in insights from similar brands, maybe verticals. So your clients also know that you're keeping a pulse on the broader landscape and that you're a good fit for that specific job. And then we're going to also suggest things such as A/B tests. Don't wait for them to ask. Proactively propose experiments to test subject lines to help them to continue to improve. Maybe it's send times or content variations based on that performance data, but we want to continuously provide, those experiments to help them improve there. We also want to highlight new features or integrations, so let them know what other tools are available to help them and how those updates can directly support their goals. And then, as mentioned, closing that feedback loop. If we're asking for the feedback, we need to make sure that we've closed that. So if they've shared past concerns or feature requests or asks of your team, make sure we're following up, showing them that their input was heard, and demonstrate progress or workarounds, or making sure that we're focusing on that feedback as well. And then finally, conducting proactive deliverability audits when it comes to email. It's a topic of conversation always. It's definitely a complicated conversation usually. So flagging potential issues early and before it even becomes a conversation is going to help them stay ahead of problems, build that trust, and just continue to build that relationship there. So let's take a look at the slide right here on the example on this slide. So the CSM that was working with this account proactively reached out about the opportunity to add SMS and basically just explained the value by highlighting the revenue the client was currently losing out on. The client agreed to add SMS to their abandoned cart flow, and they worked it into their overall strategy. And then last year alone, when we looked at those results, SMS alone generated 34% of their revenue. So pretty great results there. So the client trusted the CSM as their advisor, the CSM provided proactive support, and then the results showed just by that alone. So we all know auditing email accounts is how you're really going to be able to uncover that data, the insights and the opportunities. But what's going to truly set you apart is how you act on that information. I'm sure we've all heard it before when we're dealing with email as from our clients. They're saying, I don't want to overwhelm my customers with too many emails, or they have those theories or myths about email marketing. And that's definitely what one of our CSMs heard from their clients when they recommended turning on automated workflows. It's kind of a crazy concept. We don't want to turn on our workflows. We don't want to overwhelm people with too many emails. They were just hesitant. They were worried that too much communication would really hurt their engagement, perhaps hurt revenue long term. But their CSM came to that conversation prepared and brought data with them. So, for example, in this case, in 2024, automated emails drove 37% of the total revenue, even though they only make up just about 2% of email volume. So that kind of insight really helped reframe the conversation and opened a door to a bigger opportunity here. So we didn't push. That was important. We just partnered. We started small, just emailing a few high impact flows. And then within a few weeks, this client generated over 200K in attributed sales from workflows alone. So it wasn't just the data that won them over here in this case. It was that trust built through thoughtful communication and a strategic approach. Because even some of those best recommendations, you can come to the table with the best recommendations in the world. They're not going to land unless your client trusts you to lead them there. So here comes the fun part. Remember the results I showed you at the beginning of this presentation? So that actually came from a success story from our client, Acre Value. They've been with Omnisend since about early 2022, I believe. And for a very long time, everything was running smoothly. The CSM was engaged, they were super proactive, they were doing all the things right to set them up for success. But even strong partnerships can definitely hit challenges and roadblocks sometimes. And in this case, they ran into a major one that could have led to churn. So what happened? Basically, their domain reputation took a hit. Like I mentioned earlier, deliverability can really throw things for a loop pretty quickly. So their domain reputation took a hit, and then it caused a significant drop in engagement and ultimately their revenue as well. Fortunately, because of that relationship their CSM had with them, they were able to jump right in and step in quickly and take that lead. So basically, instead of panicking, the client leaned on that relationship, and then we got to work. Since domain reputation can definitely be a complex and technical situation, the CSM broke everything down into a few simple, actionable steps. So first, we paused broad sends and focused solely on active, engaged subscribers. We then gradually warmed up the domain by expanding sends over time. And then we launched some proactive measures for the future, so such as a sunset automation to remove unengaged contacts. And then we made it a point to educate the client along the way, explaining what the domain reputation is, why it matters, and how these steps would not only fix the issue, but how it's going to strengthen their long-term email program. So with anything deliverability related, patience is key. And it can be hard to watch the results dip without an instant fix, right? You see that, you're like, I want to fix by tomorrow. But thanks to that partnership, the trust, the strategic support from their CSM, Acre Value didn't just recover. They came back stronger with improved deliverability, smarter sending practices, and even a renewed confidence in their email program. So these steps that we took not only resolved the immediate issue, but also set the stage for long-term success. So open rates and click-through rates saw a significant increase, demonstrating that the domain reputation was being restored and engagement was back on track. Website traffic grew as more subscribers were able to see and interact with emails. It drove more visits to their site, more conversions. And then most importantly, we had a very, very happy customer, one who not only appreciated the solution, but also felt supported and valued throughout the process. But I would say here's the main takeaway from all this. We definitely avoided a potentially costly churn by leveraging every single action and strategy we had built leading up to this roadblock. It wasn't just about fixing this domain issue in this case. It was about everything we had done prior to the challenge that set the foundation for success. All of these elements, so the onboarding, the expectations, the transparent communication, it created a deep trust and a very strong, resilient relationship. So when the things got tough, the foundation we built allowed us to handle the challenge head on without losing this client. So to wrap it up, by implementing strategies like proactive audits, transparent communication, and consistent follow-ups, you'll be setting your clients up for success. When your clients succeed, you succeed because they're going to stay loyal, they're going to expand their partnerships, and ultimately they're going to become advocates for your work as well. So the most successful partnerships are built on trust and strategy and a deep understanding of each client's needs. So just like the feedback we've heard from our clients, you too can create those strong relationships and then keep the clients coming back year after year.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sydney. Something that really stood out to me from the get-go was you were talking about telling a story. And I think as humans, like we love hearing good stories or stories where we overcome something. So I think it's like a skill that I will recommend everyone working, whether it's an agency or support, whatever that is, just building that storytelling skill, because it helps to understand not only you, but you can tell like data stories, make it fun and interesting and build that foundation, as you say.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to like even when we were talking about just like hiring the correct team, that's a super important skill here for customer success managers. We have to be able to, tell a story to lead the client to make, that next step.
Absolutely. And another thing you were constantly repeating yourself, and I could not agree more, is about being proactive, because everyone's talking about how do I get my leads? How do I close that first client? But then once you get them, a lot of times your attention dips. You're like, I got them. Okay, we can do other things. So I think that proactiveness, that just has to increase.
Absolutely. It definitely seems, getting ahead of the problems, being able to fix things and get on track before it even happens is going to be key there for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sydney. I think anyone who has an agency, just steal this framework. We're giving it to you. It works at Omnisend. Break it down, apply it, see what happens.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we have our first giveaway now. We'll see how well you were listening to Sydney. So the question, well, first of all, I will ask the question and you'll have to answer it in the chat box. And whoever gets it right first will get a $100 Amazon voucher. So be quick. So the question is, what sets the tone for your success with the client? What sets the tone for your success with the client? Okay, if you got it right, okay, there's so many answers. I will let the team to catch the first one that's correct. We'll just ask you to send us your email to us, but all instructions gonna be in the chat. I'm glad to see so many correct answers. I love that you guys are listening. Right, so this went well. Next up, we have Jimmy and Chase.
Hello, everybody. Chase, how are you, man? You excited?
Yeah, I'm pumped. How are you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for waking up and jumping on this thing.
Of course, I once I missed it.
Very cool. Well, hello, everybody. We're excited here. We're a little bit of a duo here, and we're going to talk about email and SMS audit frameworks. And we're going to be talking about agency best practices. Got a lot to cover here today. I want to make sure that we're going over things. We'll be watching the Q&A box along the way to make sure that we catch any of your questions that we might see along the way. But otherwise, we love great interaction. We want people to chat, so ask us questions while we're going. And if we don't get it to them during the conversation here, we'll get through them through the thing. So real quick, starting off, just introductions, just to make sure that you guys if you don't know who we are, we want to make sure that we introduce ourselves. So first things first, I don't know why it says 7. It's 17 years of experience in email and SMS, digital marketing. I'm a former D2C brand owner turned SaaS founder, now really sitting on the content and expertise and consulting side. Some of the things I do a podcast. I have an event called Commerce Roundtable. Chase and I have an amazing retention marketing podcast, if you haven't heard about it, called Send It, that you should check out. And then we have a newsletter called Ecom Email Marketer. And Chase, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, self-proclaimed email marketing nerd, partner with Nick at Structured, recently named as the #1 influencer to follow by Shopify, built a couple agencies, had an ecom brand, and really just excited to be here.
Awesome, Chase. Well, let's get to the meat of this presentation. Here's what we're going to cover here today, guys. We've got a lot on the agenda that we want to cover, but the goal here today, because I like to set a goal with everything that we do, is how to properly audit an email and SM account from the agency perspective. I spent time with Chase, obviously with tons of experience there, but I also reached out to a bunch of different agencies that are friends of mine. And I said, how do you guys audit? And we put it all together, and then we added our flair to what we think you should do. So here's the things we'll cover today. One, we're going to talk about why audits matter. We're going to talk about how you set those baseline metrics. We're going to identify opportunities. We're going to establish clear goals. And then we're going to show you a step-by-step framework for conducting a comprehensive audit that delivers actionable insights. That's the goal here today and today's agenda here. So lots to go over. Make sure you will get the recording of this and get the notes and deck. So don't feel panicked to take a screenshot of everything that we show here. We're going to talk a lot about a lot of things here. So let's start off with the basics. And Chase, I'll let you kick this thing off with the current setup assessment. So you want to start there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and some quick background. So I actually did my first audit as an agency back in 2016, and back then it was like a Word document or like a Google document. I had no clue what I was doing. Fast forward to today, we've done hundreds and hundreds of audits, and an audit really is a great way for you as an agency to accomplish a couple of things. #1, it really serves as the roadmap for you and your team to be able to understand, if you were to land this account, and hopefully you will, where are you going to start, right? Like, where do you on this roadmap start to get that first win for your client, right? The goal should be to get that first win for the client. And then additionally, it's for the client to really understand that you know what you're doing. There's so many email marketers nowadays. Everyone says they're the best. Everyone says that they're experts. Everyone says X, Y, and Z thing. The audit's really where you prove it out. you're able to really intimately share your kind of details on their account and make sure that they know that you actually are an expert. So that's why the audit's super important. And kind of starting at the top with what's on my screen, it starts with the very basic things of like figuring out what platform is the client using. Are they using Omnisend? Are they using one of the others? What does that look like, right? And then from there, it's trying to adjust and kind of understand, like, is the data properly connected and is it flowing in? And depending on the size of the account, if they're new or if they're kind of established, some people you'd be surprised don't have the right inputs coming in, which makes it really hard to be able to segment, which makes it really hard to be able to track website visits, what makes it really hard to do X, Y, and things. Obviously, if you're working with 7, 8, 9-figure brands, a lot of this is going to already be done, but it's good just to kind of check that box to ensure that that's happening. And then with that, right, like understanding the technical setup. So is the SPF, is the DKIM, is the DMARC records, are all those records in the DNS set up properly and configured? That's super important, right, for deliverability, which we'll talk about later. And then with the deliverability side, you want to understand, like, are you coming into a hot mess? Like, is a client looking for your help because they just absolutely screwed up their deliverability and they need experts to come in? That's going to be a very challenging situation. Whereas if someone maybe has strong deliverability, but they're not making enough revenue, they're not sending frequently enough, that's really low hanging fruit. And that makes for a great opportunity. So where I would start is for the deliverability side, looking within the ESP. So look within Omnisend to get a quick check into someone's deliverability metrics, and then really ensuring and making sure that the clients have Google Postmaster, Yahoo Sender Hub set up. And if they don't, those are great recommendations for you to come in and add tons of value. They're free tools directly from Google, directly from Yahoo that every brand needs to have. And you'd be surprised how many don't actually have that. And then a couple key questions to address, right? So with all of this, kind of with the core setup, the platforms being used, making sure the Shopify or whatever platform's integrated, et cetera, you want to make sure that it's optimally configured. You want to make sure that you're getting all the data out of the actual platform itself and into your ESP. That way you can leverage segmentation and really send that personalized experience to each person. And are any integrations causing potential data loss? You'd be, again, surprised that some of these apps, they just unsync, right? They disconnect. Making sure that all of the apps, the Shopify, and even some of the others, the reviews and the loyalty, et cetera, making sure that everything's passing data through and constantly being up to speed. And then even to like taking it one step farther, people might have like something like a Zapier set up, and they might need to go reconnect that Zapier, and then data might be missing as a result because they hadn't had that connected. And then lastly, is the account structured logically and well organized? Are there proper naming conventions? Are things easy to find? Are they leveraging the features of the platform to its advantage, et cetera? And then, for example, like here's some real quotes from some of the audits that we've done. We might tell a brand, hey, we've actually found an incomplete integration between your Shopify and your Klaviyo. There's tons of data that's not there. Whereas maybe if you're using something like an Omnisend, maybe it's a more complete picture. Maybe there's something more there. And then also too, we've noticed a lot of brands have multiple platforms that just are not connected. They might use this email platform and this SMS platform and this reviews platform and this platform. There's like 17 different apps that they need to be able to communicate on the retention side, and they're just not connected, which creates this gap in this siloed data, which allows for inconsistent messaging. It's not a good thing.
All right. So once you've gone through the baseline, and the next thing that we're going to recommend that you should start going into is the overview, the strategy. Before you jump into the nitty gritty, I love to sit back and go, okay, what is the overall strategy that you're identifying within the platform, and how you believe that they've been going through it? So it may start with the simplistic of message frequency and cadence, right? You're gonna look at you're gonna look at your campaigns. You're gonna look at how are they sending, how frequently are they sending, how often are they sending, and who are they sending with, right? You're also going to look at the content mix. You want to look at, are they promotional? Are they relationship building? How are they going to approach their current strategy to maximize their sale? You also want to look at that unification of email to SMS coordination, or the lack of. Oftentimes, one of the things that we see in this market pretty often is that people are disconnected between their email and SMS, where you should have a very unified approach with the things that you have. have. And last but not least, one of the most important things that we think about is brand voice consistency. You know, a lot of times as an agency, when you're taking over for a brand or you're helping a brand, it really is important to really think about brand voice, really the copywriting behind a lot of the things that you're doing. So you're going to check through that assessment. And what that assessment may look like, it looks like this, right? So the first question you might ask is, does this content strategy align with the brand's overall marketing goals? So you're going to ask the client, you know, what are they trying to accomplish? What is your goals? Where are your benchmarks? Where your data looks like? And where are your personal business goals really at? I think one of the things that people miss often when you're an agency is that it's not just about doing the work, but it's really actually wrapping yourself within their business and understanding who you are, because you are an extension of their marketing company. Secondly, you go ask is there clear differentiation between email and SMS use cases? Are these being applied correctly? Where email is kind of like the long-term long game versus SMS being a now channel, there's a very different use case between them. Oftentimes, one of the prime examples of an audit failure, well, not audit failure, but an audit activity that we often see in the strategy side of things is that email and SMS are being treated like the same, a blast channel. And unfortunately, they're not the same. They should be treated differently. They should be acting differently, and the messaging should be different too. And the last question that I usually ask is, are campaigns data-driven or primarily calendar-driven? And there's a very difference there, right? A data-driven strategy is going to be very much around inventory, needs, business use cases, stock and inventory, a lot of the things of how people are acting and purchasing versus a primary calendar. This is kind of the typical holiday playbook you might see done by some agencies, or you might see people just going through and just hitting on the major holidays, being really quiet during the non-holiday season areas. And there's different ways that people are applying these strategies. So you want to go through that. And so some of the examples that we see pretty often when we're going through findings are very simple. Many brands send 18 plus emails monthly without any strategic segmentation. That is often a very high level strategy that you might find and ultimately uncover. Or SMS is often underutilized, representing only 25% of their attributed revenue despite a higher conversion rate. That's something that you can see where people aren't sending enough in different places. You can replace SMS with email. It doesn't matter from there. So that's the second finding we think about.
Cool. So now on the attribution and performance side, attribution is one of those things that everyone seems to have an opinion about, and every account seems to do differently. I'd say on kind of the next slide, typically we're seeing, whether you're on this ESP or another, most often it's kind of like a 5 or a 7 day kind of default attribution window. I think Klaviyo for email and SMS is 5. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Omnisend is 7. One thing to be mindful of, if you do change the attributions window settings, obviously the data is going to change too. So just make sure that's a conversation that you have with the client, that you're on the same page before you do change it. And there's obviously pros and cons to changing it versus keeping it. The pro to keeping it is the fact that when you look at data of the performance of your agency versus a previous agency or a previous freelancer or brands doing it in-house, you can compare more apples to apples. Whereas if you change it, that kind of becomes a different conversation. And then additionally, some of the stuff that we're looking for is when we get into an account, what's the breakdown between flow versus campaign revenue? Is there a landslide? Are campaigns just absolutely destroying automation or flow revenue? And if that's the case, how do we double down on sending campaigns? But how do we also get automations to contribute more revenue? Because those are low-hanging fruit. There's tons of engagement there, and I think that's an easy piece to do. So again, if you're an agency coming into an account and you notice things being really off base, that's a huge opportunity for you to come in immediately and then just double down on more campaigns to the right people, but also working really quickly and diligently on building out the automations, adding more emails to existing automations, adding new automations entirely. And then additionally, so like outside of just looking at flow versus campaign revenue, say for email or SMS, we're actually looking at how much does email contribute versus SMS contribute, right? If you're leveraging both channels, maybe SMS is newer, maybe it's contributing less. How do you grow the SMS list? What's kind of the ROI versus the cost there? Is that a good channel for your demo? If you have an older demo, if a brand is working with people, 50, 60, 70 years old, maybe SMS should not be driving tons of revenue. Maybe SMS shouldn't even be used that much entirely or at all. Whereas maybe if you're working with a younger demo, let's say 18 to 25-year-olds, and SMS is underperforming, that's probably a great place to go start and drive more revenue. Just don't be too aggressive and annoying. And then lastly, right, with all of this, you want to consider kind of last click versus multi-touch. So to kind of really quickly explain that, so last click would say I sent an email and the email had the engagement, that would essentially be on a last click model, the attributed sale or the attributed action that we're looking at. Whereas if there's a multi-touch and you're sending, let's say, emails, SMS, maybe even ads, etc., you would kind of factor in and kind of weight the different channels that contributed to that action within kind of the appropriate attribution windows. So again, no real right or wrong. It just depends on what people have been doing. And with this, a couple different kind of metrics to review. So when you're looking at kind of the revenue attribution percentage, so for email itself, it's not uncommon to be in the ballpark of 20, 25, 30, 35%. And if you are adding in SMS, your retention activities could be upwards of 40 something percent if you look at the two channels combined. And then with the flow in campaigns, obviously the ratio here is going to depend. If you have a really, really large email list and you're just hammering campaigns, obviously, right, you're going to probably be in favor of campaigns in terms of the revenue percentage. However, as close to 50-50 as you can would be fantastic. 60-40, 65-35, right? That's okay too. But if you're looking at like 80-20, 90-10 in either direction, that's an easy place to kind of focus on. And then a couple other things is revenue per recipient. So we're looking at how effective are the emails that we're sending. In terms of some of the automations, the revenue per recipient is probably going to be pretty high. In the case of like a welcome series or an abandoned checkout, in a campaign, depending on what you're sending, it may be low, it might be medium, it might be high, but really focusing on optimizing for that is important. And then also too, like with attribution, again, it's not perfect. As mentioned, people have different types of ways of looking at this. The most important thing is to look at the trend line. Is attribution for a specific channel that you're managing, in this case, email and SMS, are you making more money? Is it improving or is it declining? And if you're improving, it makes it easy to be able to hopefully continue that relationship with a brand as a service provider. And then kind of example findings. So for example, this was just one thing we pulled out of an account. So email was currently driving 21.05% of revenue for one of our clients before they started with us. And our goal with them was, hey, our goal for your benchmark in your industry is to get you as close to that 35% give or take as we can. And we're going to be working towards that over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, whatever that time frame was. And then, as mentioned before, kind of the flow campaign split was 20-80. So that had a really heavy reliance on campaigns rather than automation. So it's great to drive money from campaigns, but you also want to drive money from automations.
Cool. Then the third step, the fourth step, obviously, when we're continuing to move through this thing is to jump into deliverability. Chase and I, we talk about deliverability becoming more and more important in 2025 and beyond. And as a retention marketer or even an agency of especially, if you don't have someone who has a deliverability expertise, this is when it's starting to become more important because these are the things that you want to start thinking about. Now, obviously there's different benchmarks and different things that come into place, but here's where we start really thinking about when we go through it. And these are the 4 things that we focus on when we think about metrics. So first things first, we think about inbox placement rates, and we're talking about it at a TLD level. So we're talking about your Googles, your Yahoos, the Verizons, your Microsofts. You really want to look at them at an independent level, not at an overall level, because an overall number is not going to help. In fact, you want to continue to jump in there and look at things like open rates. Look, open rates aren't really ideal anymore. They're not realistic. They're not accurate. However, they do still show you at least a trend line, and they're still relevant information. So you want to have those information points and something you want to dive into. Then you've got spam complaints. Spam complaints are very black and white. As we've kind of mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, spam complaints from your ESP level is often not showing your Google responses, right? So you want to go set up a Google Postmaster. Yahoo Sender Hub is now becoming more and more relevant. These spam complaints are going to give you a better understanding of data. And last but not least, the thing you really want to dive into is bounce rates and list hygiene. I think this is the underrated thing that people don't think enough about, but looking at how are those emails, are they bouncing? Are you getting bad emails? Are they not getting delivered? These are important. And then of course, doing good list hygiene. Obviously, Omnisend has a great list hygiene tool already integrated and built in with the third-party provider. However, making sure you're doing list hygiene, and that's not just removing your inactives and actives and different things into the list, but it's actually really going through and matching up with third-party providers to try to understand if they've got bad emails. Unfortunately, especially in prospect lists, email list hygiene does exist. So when you go through that, you start thinking about some of the technical deliverability factors of what you're working through. So one, you're working through the domain reputation and the IP reputation, both that you're going to be able to figure out pretty quickly. And because most lists, at least in the United States, most lists are very heavy Gmail representative. If you set up your Google Postmaster tools, you're going to quickly see how your domain reputation is doing on that side and how your IP reputation is doing specifically to your domain and how the overall delivery is going to be. We already talked about this, but making sure that you've got technical authentication. There's a ton of free products out there like MX Toolbox, for example. You'll be able to set up your SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and just validate and check those. It's always good to do that. You'd be shocked how many people don't have the most basic parts of those SPF and DKIM set up. Last but not least is really just having good list cleaning practices. Look back historically, see if they've been doing any kind of list cleaning. It's not just segmentation. It's also how are they pruning? Are they removing Microsoft or Yahoo emails that are over 12 months old and have not been engaged on a prospect level? Or are they doing 24 months and honoring the sunset of Gmail, for example? Those are all basic list cleaning practices that are expected in 2025. You want to make sure that you're thinking about those things. They're very important. And some of the example findings that we find, right? So deliverability score of 77 is good, which is based on sender score, which is something that Microsoft, for example, leans on, right? Those are how they lean on. So it shows that it has so strong open rates, but a poor click performance. That's something you might see, which does hurt because open rates are not measured. So if you go to Gmail specifically, Gmail will tell you they do not measure open rates. They measure click performance or engagement. So that could be like forwarding, replying, saving it. They could be also archiving it. All those actions, how long they're spending on email, who they're forwarding, all that stuff is going to be part of the engagement metrics that you're looking for. And then, of course, bounce rates, right? Are the emails really delivering? Are domains getting blocked? Is there good hygiene and practices being done? Like last week, for example, Yahoo, for example, did their annual reset. They do a reset twice a year where they're resetting reputations across their users. And people I know reached out to me saying, hey, my bounce rates on Yahoo suddenly spiked up. Well, what happened? Well, they weren't doing good hygiene practices. So when they did a re-engagement or a reputation reset, ultimately the engagement shot through the roof and the bounces started to go up. And that's something that happens every year. And it still comes to a surprise for agencies. So these are just some core basic understandings of deliverability. There's obviously a lot you can go through in deliverability. Chase and I have a great pod called Send It that you can listen to. We talk about this stuff all the time, and we have a great one about deliverability that we just shared recently. So go check that thing out. With that, Chase, you want to talk about audience and list health?
Yeah, let's dive in. So on the next slide, let's see. Essentially, what we're looking at here, a couple of things. So we want to understand kind of the list growth rate and sources. You'd be surprised, how many brands and agencies have no clue what percentage their list is growing at or how many people they're growing each month. So you definitely want to check because it's important to get a baseline of where you're at, and then B, with that, right? Like how do you improve the list growth? And it's basically how do you optimize your pop-up forms? How do you get more people at checkout to actually opt in? How do you embed email collection forms within blog posts and kind of high traffic pages? How do you leverage even things like back in stock reminders to be able to get people to enter their email when an item goes out of stock? So there's a lot of different ways in which you can optimize for collecting more, but it starts with getting a baseline. And a lot of these recommendations I think are going to be really impressive to prospective clients because list growth is probably one of the things that they're focused on the most. The more leads they can capture, the more relevant leads they can capture, the more people you can contact, and therefore the more chances of conversions that you have. And then with that too, when you audit an account, oftentimes you're auditing another agency's work or someone else's work. How well are they doing at segmentation? Are they doing just basic 90-day engaged? Or are they being a lot more sophisticated and elaborate? And a pretty easy one. Again, the goal isn't to kind of talk shit on past agencies or other people doing the job, but the goal really is to be like, respectfully, the person doing your account now is doing this. That's not the best practice, or that's not typically what we're doing. So again, don't go smack talk people that you don't know, or if you do know them, don't go smack talk them. but find ways to respectfully call out the things that people are doing and what you do to improve. And again, I think there's a fine line between like giving away in these audits the entire A through Z playbook that you have, or kind of just giving enough so they feel like you know what you're doing, and then you kind of save a little bit of the sauce. You have to find that right balance between giving away the farm and kind of giving away, 50 and 75% of it, and hoping and praying that they choose to work with you. And then you want to also look at kind of the engagement distribution. How much of the segments, how much of the lists are actually active versus inactive, right? A lot of people don't do a great job at trying to re-engage inactive people. So you have a lot of people inactive, which gives you an opportunity to hopefully win back and re-engage some of those folks to, expand the number of people that you actually can hit. And then what are the purchase behavior breakdowns? How frequently are people purchasing? How much are they spending? Are they often buying on discounts? Are they not buying on discounts? So there's a lot that goes into this list, and you really want to be able to break it down so you can understand, like, okay, I think the low-hanging fruit is like, why don't we send more campaigns to this VIP list? They're not receiving enough campaigns. Every time we do it, or every time they get into a flow, they're obviously outperforming kind of the rest of the groups in terms of what they're spending and their frequency. So there's just so much that goes into this. And then a couple of things that we're looking at, right? As kind of mentioned before. So just kind of reiterating. So the percentage of people that have never purchased, right? You might find 50, 60, 70% of someone's list not having ever purchased. So it's like, how do we focus on first-time incentives, first-time buyer incentives, and first-time discounts, first-time offers to get someone to actually buy? When we can get someone to buy from us, the likelihood that we can get them to convert, assuming the product is good or good enough, assuming the marketing post-purchase is there, we're probably 5 times more likely to get someone to buy from us for a second time than we are to get someone to buy from us for the first time. And with that, right, like the goal of great retention marketing is how do we increase and improve that repeat purchase rate? That second, third, fourth, fifth purchase, et cetera, is where we're going to make the most amount of money. Oftentimes, right, you're spending a lot of money top of funnel on Meta, other channels. You're going to want to basically make sure that on that second, third, fourth purchase, you're recouping that investment and then some. And then, right, looking at unengaged versus engaged, I mentioned that briefly before. And then for the sunset policy. So for your sunset unengaged, which is basically the breakup series, trying to get people to, stay on your list, stay active, want to hear from you. What does that look like? Do they even have that set up at all? If they don't, what do you do to be able to improve that? And then on the next one, so for example, so again, some real data points from some recent audits. So for one audit we recently looked at, almost 63% of their list had never purchased, right? So that's a huge opportunity, right? More than half. So it's basically 2/3 of the list that we can go after and try to get to buy. That represents a huge opportunity. On the middle one, so 85% of contacts, they haven't opened an email in 30 days. So there's engagement issues, right? Maybe you're just not sending to these people and they've never even had a chance to open. Maybe your deliverability is shot. Maybe you're just only sending one campaign a month to these unengaged people, which isn't enough. Maybe there's no breakup series set up. There's just so many ways where it's like, that's a huge percentage of your list that you're missing out on. Like, what can we go do to improve that? And then lastly, right, like subscription rate is low, which is showing missed revenue opportunities. Subscription in terms of people actually joining your list, people, getting involved, people actually signing up. So these are huge opportunities that we're finding in these accounts. And when we point these out, oftentimes brands don't even know. And by putting this into contextual data, it's super important. It's eye-opening them for them. And most time, other agencies, other people aren't presenting data this simply and this, informative, that it just shows that you know what you're doing because you're paying attention to the right things.
Absolutely, Chase. And that leads us to the next part, which is really the flow and automation review and the things that you need to be looking through when you're going through this. So, obviously there's a lot of flows that you can go through. And here's the 5 that we think about the core assessment, right? You want to go through these core assessment flows and ensure that things are working correctly. So you start off with the welcome sequence effectiveness. And what's interesting about the welcome sequence is that though you as the retention marketer or retention agency are often in charge of the welcome flow, the thing is, what you're really doing is supporting the acquisition channel. So this is really, it's important where you can check out, hey, how is my effectiveness? Am I doing my job and role? Is there someone in the company, either the brand side, is there another agencies that doing, or is it within ourselves? But we're trying to figure out why and where the welcome sequence may or may not be working correctly. Then you want to go through your abandoned checkout and cart performance, right? Those are two very different things. You want to really check out how those are set up. Are they following up? Is the timing well placed? Are we really thinking about it in the right way? And are those set up where they're maximizing and getting through all the places you need to? Then you've got things like browse abandonment. Are those working? That means that your technical setup set up and all that good stuff. Then you're going to dive in even deeper into the post-purchase journey. I think this is where the retention job really kicks in. Remember, the job of a retention agency is one thing: to take your current customers and make them a second time and a third time purchasers, ultimately helping them capture profit. We are supporting the acquisition side with the welcome side, but the real job is done on the post-purchase journey. And so you really want to dive deep into that, really understand what's your strategy, what's their method, how is it working, is the data working, are you getting that second sale, third sale, are you getting people warmed up? And then last but not least on the core assessment is really looking at that win back campaign effectively. I'm talking about sunsets. I'm talking about, are people getting engaged? Or do you have all the right things done to make sure that when someone is no longer engaging or doesn't seem to be in the typical bubble and sales cycle with repeat customer, the further they're getting away from that cycle, are you helping them win them back? And so when you go through, start thinking about the next level of it, is you start going, okay, well, I've got the core down. I've really understood that. Let's go into the advanced stuff. What advanced flow evaluation do you want to look into? So first you want to look into segmentation to the sophistication. Now, this is really funny, but you actually see either over segmentation often or under segmentation often in the flows. And what I'm talking about is those conditional splits. I'm talking about your ability to understand, look, if they're a first time buyer versus a second time buyer versus a third time buyer, etc., that's a simple segmentation you should be always doing. But if you start splitting it down too categorically, too product driven, too sophisticated, if it looks like a crazy Gantt chart of 10, 20 different things, you're probably over segmentation. Remember, one of the things that I tell people is the core of a good flow is that you're working on the 80%. You're not focused on the 100%. There's no way you can do that. It just doesn't work. But you can focus on what 80% of your customers do, want, and need. You want to focus on that. You also want to look at your personalization depth. How much are you applying personalization within? Are you really focused? And is there personalization offerings that you could really have? Are they collecting first party data? Are you utilizing that? Are you thinking about that? Are you asking for more data along it? Then you've got testing. You know, one of the things I always tell marketers often is like, you should be testing everything, every campaign, every send, everything that you should be doing, even if it's small little testing, because you just want to keep collecting data. Make sure that you're thinking about it when you're thinking about it. And last but not least is trigger timing optimization. I think that people often mess this up pretty often. They're not thinking about how they think. They think about timing and trigger as like a to-do list, you know, follow up in 3 days, follow up in 1 week, where you should really be thinking about what is the individual customer's proof of how they're going through the journey. You know, what's their experience? You should go through the experience and figure out what would be your experience. You should be looking at the data, just like Chase mentioned earlier, around what's your sales cycle? How long does it take typically for a customer to make a second purchase, to make a third purchase? How long does it take a pop-up person to make an average sale? All of those are trigger timing optimizations that you can start putting into play. And those are evaluations that you should be doing as you go through it. There is a lot when it comes to thinking about it. And that gives you some example findings we found. Like things like abandoned checkout shows 36% open, but a 1.49% conversion, falling short of a 2.92% average benchmark. We know the benchmarks, they're there for a reason. You want to use those because it's leverage. Not only does it show you to your client that you're sophisticated and you're thinking about it, but it's also showing you a place where you can aim for. And when you're half the conversion rate, well, there's a problem there, right? Welcome Series 3. Welcome Series is only 3 emails focusing on initial ever missing key brand storytelling opportunities. You could be telling stories. You could be doing social proof. You could be asking questions. There's so much you can be doing. And this is a very simple way to go off and show them that like you really care about what their brand is doing and their brand messaging is doing. But not only that, but how you can incorporate storytelling to help them find more opportunity. And then, of course, one of my favorites that I see, and this is like probably the biggest thing I see in flows, there's literally no differentiation between a new and a repeat customer in abandonment flows, right? When an abandonment flow is happening, just because they've abandoned a browse abandonment, you shouldn't be just sending them, you just left us behind. That is the most lazy way of approaching retention marketing. What you should be doing is, again, tapping into the data, tapping into the segmentation. Hey, if they're a repeat customer, you should be like, hey, welcome back. Great to see you here. You left this in the cart. Here's some other offerings that are tied to that using a product recommendation engine, you should be thinking about how to go one step deeper with it. And that really is a core thing. And saying stuff like this and being able to show a customer that you're identifying these things is going to win them over, because these are really absolutely things that people will really connect with. All right, Chase, continuing on, let's jump over to the campaign side. What you got?
Let's do it. And by the way, hopefully this is helpful and hopefully this is making sense so far. But on the campaign side, so again, huge opportunity. People love campaigns. They're pretty easy to do and send. So definitely spend some time kind of understanding how the current brand does campaigns and kind of contrasting that to, how you do campaigns. And I'm sure there's going to be kind of some opportunities here. So campaign calendar structure, if a brand is working with an agency or if they're doing it in-house, they might just be kind of shooting from the hip. They might not have something planned out. So I would focus on building kind of your recommendations in here. We typically at our agency, you could say whatever X, Y, and Z. We plan at least a month out. We're going to ask you for approvals. Here's how we structure it. That way we can get campaigns out that look really good without errors, et cetera. So I think simultaneously walking through what they're doing well and what they could be improving and kind of how you handle things at your own agency is super helpful, so they can kind of see your process, the whole seeing is believing type thing. And then with that too, again, we talked about the segmentation a little bit before, but kind of how in the campaigns are segmenting it, or if they're not at all. The testing methodology, again, a lot of brands will either test and then they never review their test, or they're just not testing at all. So make sure that you have a test on every single email if possible. Make sure that you're reviewing and analyzing the tests after they happen. I would jot them down within your kind of platform for management of that client. So for us, whether it's like a Notion or a ClickUp or Asana, however you're managing each client, you should have a section within each specific client's thing of, we tested a serious subject line 5 times and versus a funny one, and the serious one 4 out of 5 times, or whatever that looks like. Jotting down kind of notes, that way it's like, all right, when you're going to go test and build things out, you now already have a framework for the specific client that you've proven to work. Testing send times, testing offers, all of these types of things. Jimmy and I actually recorded a podcast yesterday about how to make the most of like the off season. So not Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and like testing throughout kind of the slower seasons gives you a lot of data going into peak seasons like BFCM. That way you just have all of this data on hand that you absolutely can crush it and smash it out of the water. And then again, understanding the subject line and content performance, all these types of things are super important for campaigns. So that way you can squeeze more and more engagement and more revenue for each client. And then a couple things. So understanding open rate trends. Again, obviously with everything that's happened over the past couple of years, open rates themselves aren't exactly 100% accurate, but looking at trends is important. For example, if you see your open rate drop drastically, you're probably hitting spam. You probably got deliverability issues. If you're seeing, your open rates stay steady, you're probably fine. If they're spiking really, really high for no rhyme or reason, maybe something weird and funky is happening. Same with click-through performance. A lot of times, there's times where like, Microsoft or whatever platform, they have just a ton of bot clicks. So like overnight, your clicks might spike, and it's not indicative of actually something that's happening. So just being able to kind of be mindful and understand like when something's legit and when something's kind of artificially inflated will give a lot of insight to you, but also show your clients that like you are on top of it and you're up to speed with what's happening. And then obviously optimizing for conversion rate is super important. And then again, we've mentioned this before, but revenue per recipient is important as well. And then some real example findings. So for something recently, a current open rate was about 36%, which was good. But our goal would hopefully be at north of 40%. That's kind of the benchmark. And someone asked before, so like a lot of the data that we're pulling are from kind of Omnisend. So basically what we'll do is say we're working with an apparel client. We'll go look at Omnisend's kind of library of data on apparel clients across their, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands of apparel clients. So we'll basically say, cool, so for apparel, we're going to benchmark at 40%. For health and wellness, that might be 35% or it might be 45%. So really looking at kind of e-commerce as a whole, but then being more granular and looking at specific benchmark data to your industry is really important. Even things like your geography, maybe breaking it down by apparel brands in the US or apparel brands in Europe, et cetera. And then looking at click rates, same type of thing. If someone's at 0.36%, maybe the benchmark for that industry could be 4%. Maybe that we're looking at here some kind of automation or flow type thing. And then place order rate as well. So if the place order rate is well below average, what can we do to improve conversions, right? Maybe better offers, maybe better segmentation, maybe more relevant, more kind of urgency driven copy, right? There's a million one things that you could do. So identifying kind of the thing that's wrong allows you to reverse engineer then how do you solve for that thing.
Absolutely, Chase. And well, that leads us to segmentation strategy assessment. I think this is another place that a lot of agencies don't spend enough time really understanding, but also showing off your expertise. One of the things that people really understand is that segmentation is important, and people don't really have a great grasp about why segmentation is important. So a lot of times when you're going through an audit, one of the things that you should be doing is really not only talking about, but analyzing, are they doing segmentation? Are they simply taking 90 days and saying, oh, 90 days, open click, batch them into one campaign and send them out? Or are they actually thinking about what is the segmentation of some of the basics of the things that you can do, right? You can do things like post-purchase, engagement-based, product preference, and then geographic or demographic segmentation. Those are four of the most basic segmentation approaches. Just simply showing off that will show off your strength in some of the things that you can go into. If you dump into that, it really goes into sophistication, right? And the good news about a lot of this stuff is that, if you're using tools like Omnisend in different places, a lot of this stuff is already naturally built in, like the RFM model, for example. RFM being recency, frequency, monetary. It's an old adage. It's been around since, it's how I learned email marketing in 2008, guys. And so RFM, for example, is something that people don't understand. Recency, how long has it been since they've purchased? How long has it been since they've opted in? Frequency is how long has it been since they've visited your site versus how long has it been since they've made their last purchase. And monetary is how much have they spent, or how long, or what have they added to their cart, or value of that cart, right? All of those are real big data points that you can use today to drive sophistication around your segmentation. Then you get into the intermediate where you're using RFM and engagement and preferences. You're going beyond the rule-based segmentation and starting to use the actual data that's within the platform that they've collected. If you're using something like Omnisend, for example, you will be able to look at their recent engagement, and they come to your page, what kind of preferences they have, what kind of first party data you have. That's also important. And then you go into the advanced levels. And I like to think about this as step 1, 2, 3. And when I'm talking to a lot of clients, oftentimes when I'm talking to clients, I'm saying, hey, let's start and walk, run, and sprint, right? We can't go from walking to sprinting. Oftentimes, most people are even below the basic side of sophistication of segmentation. So let's get you understanding how to kind of engage and layer those into your business. And this is how we start optimizing, how we create personalization, how we create better outputs for people. So those examples may look like this. Current segmentation is primarily based on purchase history with limited engagement criteria. I see that quite often. That's not a shocker. There's a no product interest segmentation despite clear category preferences in the purchase data. All your products, all your brands, all your clients often have simple, different product categories. If you can categorize them to certain ones and be able to identify them to client, hey, Mr. Klein, you've got pants, shoes, and shirts on your site, and you've got, hundreds of SKUs on them, but these are the 3 categories. I categorize those on those different segments to show you that this is where your dollars are being spent. In fact, one thing I'm seeing really clearly is that you're selling mostly shirts in your business. Pants and shoes are pretty low. A, should we go clearance those? Or B, do we want to put more emphasis on it? It's a really simple way to go show them that you really dove into your data, and segmentation is obviously a pool. And it also will show them that you're understanding the knowledge behind what segmentation really does for the business ultimately. And last but not least is missing opportunity by segment, right? Energy versus hydration versus focus is an example of a purchase motivation. Why are people clicking? You've already collected first party data, for example. You've already been able to see what kind of tools, not tools, but what kind of products that they're adding to their product, or what kind of products that they've added to cart or did abandon, or even their purchases that they have. And each one of those may have a different reason. Energy, hydration, focus is an example, for example, that you might see within a spectrum of segmentation. So that's really, really important when it comes down to it. So let's jump into an effective framework audit. And Chase is going to close this thing down here as we're wrapping it up. But Chase, want to tell them what the most important things when you're thinking about this framework is?
Yeah, for sure. So we're in the final stretch, guys. We went through tons of stuff. Now this end is like, how do you wrap it with a bow? How do you make it, look professional? How do you actually get it to land well? So a couple of things that we found over the last, I don't know, 9 years, however long it's been, is starting with the win. So, don't just bash people out the gates. No one wants to be told right away that they suck, right? Everyone wants to, it's the whole thing, like compliment, then give it to them straight, and then kind of end and let them down easy. The same type of thing is applicable here as well. So start with what's working well, right? Give them a little bit of kudos, put them in the right mindset and make them kind of smile, and then kind of hit them with some of the opportunity. And the right clients, when you share the opportunities respectfully, they're going to be appreciative because at the end of the day, they want to make more money, they want to have a better business, and this is kind of the whole goal of this. And then with that too, like I mentioned when I first started back in 2016, everything was like on a Google document, Word document, whatever. There was just a lot of text. So helping visualize the data is super, super important. And it also shows that you are kind of design oriented, design minded. So getting some kind of designer from your team and taking some of the findings and taking those metrics and turning them into really compelling, clear visuals really will help clients understand the value that you bring just by skimming and kind of scanning the presentation. And with that, like I would have some kind of PDF, some kind of Google Slides type deck that you have versus a Google document like I used to use. And then benchmark comparison. So again, leveraging the real data from other merchants in your field, as mentioned before, is super important. Oftentimes, a lot of people ask, like, well, where do you find the data? Think about your clients too. They're often so busy doing a million and one things. They're not specifically looking at what's my benchmark for this specific email. Where you, as the email marketer, you as the email agency, you as the freelancer, this is your job. You are all in on email. You're all in on retention and SMS. You go find that data and point out really clearly and really easily where they're kind of falling short and what things you would do to get them up to, at bare minimum, kind of the industry average. And then with that, help them understand the priority, right? You're going to probably report on a million and one different things. What are the top 3, 5, or maybe even 7 things in which you'd start? And that way they can understand that you not only understand their account, but you have a tangible plan. A lot of times what we understood and kind of figured out was we had all of the insights, we had all the knowledge, we had all the things in place, back in 2016, but we just did a really poor job at like explaining to the clients, like, this is where I would start, and making things look really pretty and button up. And that's really kind of what we focused on over the years. That's helped us, land clients pretty easily. And then on the next one, so again, a little bit more on the structured side. So what I would do is kind of structure it this way. It's having on the first page, kind of an executive summary. What are you going to be covering? What's the overview? Kind of like the table of contents, but a little bit more compelling and stronger. And then current performance versus benchmarks, as talked about, the top opportunities by revenue impact. So again, if people are missing something like the welcome series for non-buyers, the abandoned checkouts, any kind of cross sells and upsells, those are great opportunities. Or if people are just not sending enough campaigns or ignoring certain key segments, that's a huge opportunity to drive a lot of revenue. So if you're an agency charging $2,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, but you can come to a client and pretty easily make that back and then some very quickly, like you're going to pay for yourself, right? So your whole goal is, how do I drive the most impact in the least amount of time to be able to deliver results that my client wants? That's huge. And then again, the roadmap with a timeline. So breaking out, pretty clearly, I would start with these flows, in week 1. I would start with these campaigns in week 2. I'm going to start building out segments in week 1 and week 2 for the campaigns and the automations in week 1 and week 2. So just having that built out is super important. And then some kind of ballpark of results. Again, you never know for sure. You can't say we're going to go from 10K a month to 20K a month in 7 days. Like, be realistic and also give a range and let the client know, like, hey, I don't know for sure. Based off other clients that we worked with in the past, this is what we've seen. And don't hold me to this. It's going to be plus or minus within this range. And just have an open and honest conversation about it. And then
With
that's
that,
it.
yeah, that's it. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation. As you kind of have noticed with Nick, also in the early parts, we are available on X and LinkedIn. Those are the 2 places. Well, Chase has found a lot more places, Instagram, Threads, and other places too. But this is how you find us. This is how you email us. This is how you get a hold of us. We talk about retention, copywriting, deliverability, AI. We talk a little bit about everything on the market, and we're quite active in the market. So if you've never followed us or listened to us us and shared with us, please join us. And if you are already a follower, great. Thank you for continuing to follow us. But with that, thank you very much, Val, for bringing us on here. We're excited. We hope that we helped understand an effective framework for your agency.
Oh, fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. Like, it was so jam-packed with information. And just to answer everyone in the chat, you will get a recording of this. You'll get the slides. And Chase, when you said that Word document, it literally flashed before my eyes because I've done that as well. Like, I know what you're talking about. And I think it's very relatable to so many people here.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm aware of the time, but we still have one voucher to go. So we'll see how well you were listening to Chase and Jimmy. So get ready to type your answers. And the question to get a $100 Amazon voucher is, what should you start your client presentation with? What should you start your client presentation with? Amazing. I can see so many correct answers. I'm glad you listened, and I will let Ira to get the first person who responded correctly. And now our final speaker, I'm very excited to introduce Jesse. Jesse, coming up.
Thank you. And Chase and Jimmy, that was awesome. Just as a note on that, and then I'll get my deck up. Audits are so important and so great. Like, we had a big brand where we took a look, and it's a brand you'd know the name of and you assume it works, and 40% of their names didn't pass through from their web opt-in because there's a messed up integration. So the takeaway is what Chase and Jimmy talk about, we see every day in practice. Highly recommend starting with an audit, and also just builds trust. And you can bring them actual results to go from there. So that was super valuable. Thanks, guys. I'm going to share my screen. So the framing for this is, I think there's a lot of agency owners, probably similar to where I'm at, where we're less mature of an agency. I think there was great insights from Nick, Jimmy, Chase on all of that. But for framing, I have run my agency almost as a freelance business for 4 or 5 years, and then I left my full-time job about a year ago at a bank doing stuff and running this on the side. And since then, we're pacing at low 7 figures. Vast majority of it is profit because we have no W-2 employees right now. It's 1099s plus the use of other tools. So I want to and there's no turnover because we don't have external staff. And obviously that's going to change as we scale. But the number one question I get asked from other agency owners is, how can you scale and make it efficient without going insane, especially if you don't have other W-2 employees on your payroll? So that's what I hope to go through here. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. And I'm happy to go through it. But essentially, the key point, and there's so many platforms that you could be using, so many ESPs, so many attribution tools, so many marketing tools, so many AI tools to help be more efficient. So our process is, what is the way to do it in the most sustainable way where you can grow your business, grow your services, grow your revenue, grow your profit without losing your mind? So that's the broad frame. We want to try and bring everything together from the great sessions we've had with everyone else. So the core takeaway here is when and why to expand partners. So you have Omnisend, you have Klaviyo, you have Attentive, you have a million different platforms. How do you pick where to go and what version to go with? And the initial thing before we go into anything is, where do your clients currently sit? So you meet a new client, you don't need to immediately, the second they join, say, hey, you're on this, that's broken. Let's move you off. I think that's a terrible way to build rapport. The opportunity there is you evaluate the needs and the capabilities that they're on. You do the audit like Jimmy and Chase talked about. And then once you've settled in and gained trust with them, you can migrate to a trusted partner. So whether that's an Omnisend or whoever that person is, I would be careful on the way you do it. So you provide value and then you can transition them off. And different sizes have different solutions. So our number one recommendation is have a short list of preferred ESPs for different size businesses. The e-com business with $1 million in revenue probably should be using a different platform as a $100 million SaaS company, and should be different from $1 billion a year e-com business. So the takeaway is, I don't think you should be juggling 30 different ESPs. It's going to break. It's going to be confusing. You want to have relationships, but find places where you can assign to different levels of clients and make sure they integrate well. Like, we run into the issue all the time where we'll see a client's thing, do an audit, and say, hey, that big integration you have here on reviews just isn't flowing into the email platform you use. So you can run the things against each other, but it's not flowing together. So make sure they run smoothly. And then the only other thing is more ESPs do not always equal more business. I think it's the number one misconception is if I join 30 partnership programs, I'm going to do 30 times as much revenue this year. If that doesn't, in practice, I don't think that applies. Rather, we would recommend developing rapport with ESPs you already use. So if you're on this, there's probably a good opportunity to connect with the team at Omnisend and chat with them. If you're on any other platform, if you already have clients sitting on platform, from my experience, most partnership programs will talk to you because they want to develop more people who are already working with people on platform and look for opportunities to work with them, to like look for lead opportunities, look for co-marketing opportunities, look for places where you can provide value. And a lot of times they're all ears on bringing strong new growing agencies to the platform as well. So now the next question is, all right, great. I understand that I want to grow. I want to pick a new partner. I might want to pick a different one for different segments, but how do I pick? So who are the right people to join? And at its simplest, and we can get hyper tactical, and maybe there's a separate webinar for all of this, but at an ultra high level, and at the interest of time and the amount of value that has been prior, my general advice is look for ESPs that want to work with you. There's some that don't, but I think there's a lot that really do and have a ton of product updates that are giving you feedback on your clients and are proactively reaching out on, hey, we saw you're doing this with a client. This might be an interesting way to look at it. They have new reports. They'll give you leads. They'll partner in your success. And most importantly, all of that's cool, but it's all moot if the product's not good. Because if it's not a robust product that has a future roadmap on stuff that your clients and you think need to be done, you don't want to be going up on a platform that's sinking. So look for things that are growing at the same rate as you are so that you know that there's an opportunity there and there's real investment to be able to scale it. And then the other thing, make sure there's good customer support. Like I think a lot of platforms have very similar tech stacks, but not all of them have equivalent customer service. And yes, I definitely mean on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, when something doesn't work, we had this on a client this year where we sent something and I had a question on what's going on here. Within 30 seconds on Black Friday, we're getting an answer and the problem's getting resolved. So I look for who are the people that you're working with and how do they work? And then all of the other stuff is very important on top of that, but that's a benchmark that we operate off of. So avoiding chaos, how do you do it? What are the systems and processes to actually keep it moving? I broke it down into 3 simple things, and we'll spend a little bit of time on each. But especially if you do not have W-2 employees who are full-time under you and you need to grow scalably, repeatably, not lose your mind, not open one client thing at 8 a.m. and then at 4 p.m. be like, oh my God, I never completed the thing at 8 a.m. this morning because you had no idea. And especially when you're onboarding vendors. So we have 10 great part-time people that we staff out projects to on different stuff, but they need to get tracked and they need to get led. So how do we do that? Number one, on a tool stack, pick one tool. I stick to like one thing per topic. So pick a great project management tool. Use Slack or a great communication tool. Have an Asana dash. Pick a good task manager. And at the end, I'll share where you can get all of this. I have a little onboarding guide on all the things we use and our stack that we can send across if that's helpful. But have your dashboards and all of your key KPIs that no matter what client you're on, you onboard them the same way. So you know that if you're looking at your Monday.com task manager, it has all of your clients and all the corresponding vendors for that account are on there. Number 2, on team structures, make sure you have roles so that platforms have different owners and have an onboarding process and have check-ins. My classic meltdown that I've seen happen a bunch of times is you onboard, but you don't have a process. There's no understanding on who owns what. The client thinks you own design, you think they own design, or they're handling analytics, or they set up a meeting with Omnisend to do your quarterly business review when you did. So make sure that, again, it's a task manager and that you have benchmarks on who owns what, when it's owned, and a real process. And that goes into the final thing of, for each platform, make sure you have SOPs. I think it's the number one thing that's helpful, especially when we're hiring vendors, is if I want to onboard somebody quickly, either a new client or a new vendor or a new teammate, what's the process? Like, if you do it yourself every time, it's going to be a very long process, a very inefficient process, and it's not scalable. What's worked for us is there's a Loom video that outlines the entire process. With AI now, that Loom video turned into a 30-page guide on what happens at the top. And it was just me talking for an hour and a half at AI on here's what to do. And it's very doable. And again, I can share any of the prompts we use, how we set up the guides, what that entire process looks like. But you have it so a new client comes on, you know they've flown to this Slack, and then their work board goes to here, and then you do a weekly check-in here. And I'll talk about that a bit later on. But documentation and SOPs, it's never been easier to do it properly with how technology is because you don't need to do it handwritten. You can do one good Loom recording or two good Loom recordings, throw it into ChatGPT and get an unbelievable outline that you can edit off of. So this is the biggest one that I think we see a lot, that people are biting off more than they can chew. So they want to grow their business. They're so excited to grow their business. They're getting great leads, but they're like, do I grow now? Should I not grow now? It's something we dealt with on, I said, hey, we're growing. And do I have the infrastructure available to support the growth and the partnerships to do it? Because if not, I can add 50 clients tomorrow, but is there the infrastructure to add? And initially the answer was no, because I would have done that and my business would be over because there would be no check-ins, no tasks, no frameworks, no processes. And now, thankfully, that's not the case because we've put in these systems. So there's an established process where onboarding and an audit isn't as stressful because there's a process. And eventually they can get offboarded to vendors or members of your team where there's a tried and tested process on here's how we do our audits. Here's exactly what we're checking for. Here's the things to look out for. Very similar to what Jimmy and Chase said, like having a core thing that you base off of, I think is very important. And then saying yes to good clients. I think the rule of thumb probably stands here too, that the 80-20 rule on like your best clients are probably a smaller base. And there's a lot of clients that I think agency owners realize where it's the one who your cheapest client usually takes the longest to pay an invoice or has the most problems versus like the top clients you send and they pay within 5 minutes and ask relative questions. So good clients are great, but again, don't be afraid of growth. I think like, especially when they're coming from referral partners or you're getting good leads, you shouldn't be afraid of growth. We weren't, and it's worked out great on once the systems are set up, go and do it. And again, this ties to a lot of the frameworks that we can share on how to do it tactically and then scale sustainably. So what worked in Q1 or Q4 of last year might not work in Q1 because going from 0 to 100,000 is very different from 100,000 to 700,000 is very different from 700,000 to 7 million. So continue to update your SOPs, continue to work with your team and clients to make sure that you can try and consolidate everything in one core dashboard and center that you can bring all of your clients into. And number two, on the email thing on the left, find a good tool for your email management. I use Superhuman. There's a bunch of them, but getting as close to inbox zero has been so helpful from a side on ours because otherwise there's a million different emails going back and forth every day. So properly foldering on client accounts has been very helpful for us. So spoke about optimization and how that works. Here's the general advice on one case study, which we'll go into next on how we actually did it. But on the optimization, on communication previously, for an example client, we were running through emails only. So we would go back and forth. We'd have a process on what's releasing this week and how do we want to do email, or we want to do retention and a Facebook offer. What's we doing here? Now everything stood up in Slack. We have calls as needed where there's stuff, and we have a stand-up. There's a daily stand-up if something important is happening on that client account so that there's communication and contact. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of agencies I've seen have slipped on is just constant contact with your clients. Like, for example, if you have a bunch of clients that are e-commerce or importing goods from Asia or anywhere in the interim, half of my day yesterday was spent just doing outbound proactive reach outs to clients on how are tariffs impacting your business? Can we help? Should we try and front sell anything that you think? So add those in. Be hyper. I've realized you can't be too communicative with clients, but you can not do it enough. I've never seen an agency get fired for calling too many times and making sure that the brand knew that they were being helpful. But I have seen agencies get fired because they set it and forget it. So, and it could be phone calls, it could be Zoom, it could be Slack. Just a, hey, what's up, guys? Here's a thought on X has been super helpful for my business. On design and workflows, this has been really helpful, especially as we've grown outside of just email and into more of just a broad retention firm. On performance, it used to, using design as one example, we'd have a designer send stuff to the client would come back to us, we'd go back to the client would go back to us, then they'd want to manage design internally, and it would be a never-ending loop where nothing would get done. So we created a process, and this is another one I'm happy to share on what is our design and content calendar structure for all brands, where here's the guide, here's when we need approvals by, here's what we want your feedback on, and then we can batch and go. And obviously, there's always going to be stuff where urgent campaign comes up for today at 3 o'clock. Like we had one this morning for a couple brands, and that happens, and it's totally fine. But having some type of system and process where brands know how to approve, you have weekly check-ins with them to approve, and you know what they're looking for has been very helpful. And then similarly on analytics, it used to be ad hoc calls and check-ins when problems happen. So we'd get like a panicked call, like, oh my God, we don't think this is delivering, or this is happening here, or we have this urgent release, we need to do it now. Or what does this report mean? Because I just pulled it and I don't understand. To now, we have a weekly check-in with all of our clients just to run through analytics. We have stuff on top of it, but we do like a KPI call once a week with every client. And then bi-monthly, for whatever ESP you sit on, but we're using Omnisend as the example here, obviously, I'll have a call bi-monthly with the CSM on whatever client account it is. And then if the client wants to join, they're more than welcome, or we'll handle it and send them a summary. But it just keeps a cadence moving, and you hear about new features because as you guys have probably seen from the blogs, Omnisend's releasing a lot of stuff. I'm very excited from seeing the partner dashboards, and I want to make sure that our clients are using it and aware of it. And then the final one is, if you're like me, you're probably working with other agencies, especially on bigger clients. So there's a vast majority of larger, let's call them 9 and 10 figure brands who have 7, like literally have 12 agencies doing different things. And it used to be where there was no communication. So we'd be running something on an email, SMS, and Facebook standpoint. The Google pay-per-click guy was running his own campaign. The affiliate team was running their own thing. Web design was happening, which was taking down one of our landing pages. But nobody knew and there was no connection, which was harmful to the business because their stuff wasn't unified. Like if you're going to spend the money to do this, you're going to want to make sure it's happening. And then number two, is hard for our business to staff things because it was conflicting messages. We'd be running one campaign on us, Facebook's running another, and we have no idea what's truly happening. So our rule of thumb is just a shared Slack channel for a client with all of the vendors and agencies that are working unified. Not that you need to be active in it every day, but at least you understand when we're sending a campaign on something or we have our week calendar, we share it with the other agencies so that they're aware to use it and they can go and work off of it, and vendors that are on the account. So that's a recommendation there. And then I wanted to do one quick case study on what this all led to in real dollars, real practice with a real brand. And we're actually going to do another webinar on this. I think it's in 2 weeks. Maybe somebody from the Omnisend team can put in the chat when the actual case study is. But we're doing a case study describing we took a brand who had no consistent, repeatable process to scale their list using the exact systems I just talked about on scaling with them. They had multiple agencies, but there was no internal systems or dashboarding, and they didn't have workflows or processes to build a design and content roadmap on a moving forward basis. And they had about, I think they did $30,000 in email revenue when we took over the account, and they had, I think, they had maybe 10,000 email subscribers. It's in the case study, whatever the true amount is, and it scaled. So now they have 145,000 email subscribers. The account's growing 55% a year on revenue. They do about $1.5 million on email, and it's growing and it's scaled properly. And we've now duplicated that with dozens of clients because we followed that same process. So I can share any of that processes that we use if helpful. And then really, I would highly recommend for either you or anybody who's interested, we're doing another one of these with Omnisend in literally 2 weeks. And the one other thing I would love to add on this is, I know I spoke about AI earlier, and there's a big difference between driving with AI, which is like, why are you doing work and using AI to double check and generate data. We use it for the latter, and I think it's a no-brainer for any agency owner. On our rule of thumb is no email can go out until 2 people and 1 AI have checked it, just for grammar, spelling, design, and you create custom prompts and it follows it. Or alternatively, we use it a lot for data downloads. So very similar to what Nick spoke about earlier on tracking analytics and attribution, Jimmy and Chase, is I want to understand what the data means. And I can obviously go into my dashboard, see it from a very tactical view, X dollar return on these types of campaigns. But what we love doing is literally downloading our export data on all of our campaigns, throwing in our subject lines, and going very deep in the weeds on AI. And I can share these prompts as well on, based off of the data and to the corresponding audiences, what am I not understanding about subject lines that are performing best or design? The takeaways we've seen from it are so insane that I would have never realized, that have driven millions of dollars in lift for brands, simply because it recognized that putting a ... on certain camp vendors and their subject was crushing it versus the period versus an exclamation mark, or ones where we led with an offer header versus an offer footer had a certain impact, or certain segments responded to different times. I just use it as a second brain on it, downloads the amount of info at a much quicker clip. So I would highly recommend using that. And overall, like, here's the key takeaways on audit before expanding. Like, before you bring a client and say, we're going to go chase a new vendor, make sure you understand what they're doing and gain some trust. Limit your preferred ESPs. So make sure you're working with, you have a strategic shortlist. Give your 1 or 2 per segment that you know you have a great relationship and you can call somebody from the ESP and say, hey, we have a problem, or hey, can you help migration for this client? Set up SOPs and checklists. So make sure you have an operational machine that can scale. And then the biggest one here, vet partners thoroughly. Like, the massive part of our business is trust and reputation and what your performance is. So make sure that you don't take somebody off of a platform to bring them to an ESP or another vendor that sucks, because it's the easiest way to, without you doing any poor form on your work, you're ruining your reputation and their trust in you. So make sure that they're actually going to grow with you and then grow with confidence. So if you have the system staffing models in place, scaling doesn't have to be scary, whether you have 80 employees and you have a bunch of W-2s ready to go do it, or you have 10 vendors. It's less about the quantity in my head, and it's more about, do you have the process that can scale up? And then optimize with tools. Like I said, I think in the age of AI where we are now, there's never been a better time to be able to run systems and processes through it and triple check everything. So use those. And then finally, I like Q&A. You're more than welcome. A couple of things. If you want, I'll come up with an onboarding guide similar to everything I just spoke about. If you just go to our website and go to the bottom and put your email in, I'll send a follow-up email on anybody who came in here and share it. And then if we can help with anything, you're more than welcome to email me. It's just jesse@vibermedia.com if there was anything that was interesting on here that you have questions about. And I hope to see you all on that secondary webinar on the actual brand side case study, and maybe there will be some interesting takeaways there.
Jesse, thank you so much. We shared the link in the chat for the registration, so make sure everyone to click it and register. You will also receive a recording of it if you can't make it. And you will receive the recording and all the slides in our follow-up email as well. Jesse, what I loved is you kept emphasizing systems and processes, and I could not agree more. Like, keep it simple, nail it. Do not rush, because everyone's going to be selling you. Everyone's going to be telling you, you need this and you need this and you need this. But getting the basics right, like, just do that first and you'll see like the results immediately.
Totally. And I think it's the thing where it's painful in the moment. Like, nobody wants to sit down for a day or a week and actually create processes, because it sucks. Like, it's not a fun one. Like, especially if you're a marketer or an agency owner, you're in this probably because you're creative and fun. Like, you don't want to spend 12 hours configuring Zapier and then Slack and then Asana and a million things, but it pays such dividends. We've realized over time. Like, sit down, find a weekend, crank it out, and it will forever be useful, because it'll be useful today and it'll be useful in 3 months and 3 years as you grow. You'll have everything documented.
Absolutely. A pro tip from me is, whenever you get like an app or whatever tool you're going to be using, they have onboarding processes. You can ask for a demo. So use those expertise of those people and like make it work for you. Leverage it for you. Be like, I'm this business. I have these goals. How can I utilize your tools? And trust me, most of them will respond to you immediately. And you will learn so many hacks. You'll be amazed.
Totally agree. And same thing with platforms. Like, if you come over to Omnisend or you come over to any platform, any good one is going to have a great support team that will walk you through your client's migration, your agency migration. Like, you don't need to do it alone. There's pretty much support everywhere you can turn. So take advantage of it.
That's a good point, that if you sign up and you ask for onboarding, or like if they offer it to you immediately, that's a good sign. That's a trustworthy company to give them a shot.
Totally. But thank you again for having me. I hope you all found value in this, and definitely feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, X, or our website, and I'll definitely keep you in the loop on any of our findings from this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jesse, so much. I have one last question for the audience to win a $100 Amazon voucher. So get ready to type. And the question is, to avoid chaos, you need a good tool stack. You need clear team structure. And what was the third component to avoid chaos? John, well done. That was quick. I bet you're happy that you stayed till the end. Ira's going to be in touch and ask for your information. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Speakers, thank you so much. Nick, Sydney, Jimmy, Chase, and Jesse, thank you so much for being here and giving your time. That was packed with value. I really, really appreciate it. And everyone, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you later. Thank you.